There's an old saying where I'm from. Rudy Gobert is the Jazz's best regular season player, but Donovan Mitchell is their best guy when it comes to the playoffs. And boy oh boy is that ringing true right now. Let me say this right off the bat. I've never given Mitchell enough credit. Before this season, I questioned both his playmaking ceiling and the consistency of his three-point shot, both areas in which he's improved dramatically. And throughout this season, I focused overwhelmingly on the brilliance of the Jazz as a team, their unmatched depth, all-time shooting and two-way prowess, without giving as much shine to their clear best offensive player, who I might have said was not totally essential to their night-to-night regular season success, as he scored on slightly below average efficiency on the year, and the Jazz statistically performed better with him off the floor than on it, and they just felt like a machine that wouldn't stop no matter what. And it feels like, with a sea of talented young players showing up in big moments, dominating the NBA landscape right now, Donnie can get overshadowed. But what we're seeing right now from the 24-year-old is undeniably remarkable. Through 2 games, he has shredded the Clippers, averaging 41 points per game, and is now in the midst of his second consecutive outstanding postseason, as he's put up nearly 35 points per game on 51, 47, 92 splits over his last 13 playoff games. The dude is otherworldly right now, but this elevation of his level come playoffs isn't flukish. Mitchell has a skill set that just becomes more valuable when basketball matters most, and he never fears the moment. That average regular season efficiency has skyrocketed for the second straight year to elite status in the playoffs, and the Jazz have, for the second straight year, been leaps and bounds better with him on the floor than off it in the postseason. Personally, I think we see Mitchell take this playoff leap because of a couple key areas in which he shines. Adaptability as a scorer and having a variety of counters, and the essential ability to create for oneself at an elite level and display big-time shot making. But before we really understand why those traits matter so much and why Mitchell takes a leap when the game should theoretically be getting harder, I think it's important to look at a few of these playoffs' most notable underperformers, guys who shine in the regular season but fell flat in these playoffs who distinctly lack those traits. Let's start with Kristaps Porzingis. Despite his perceived status as a second star, KP averaged just 13 points per game against the Clippers on under 30% shooting from deep, repeatedly disappearing when his team should have needed him most. So why couldn't KP help his team in need? Well, he doesn't have the skill set nor the mindset to take over a game. In these playoffs, 79% of KP's shots were either a turnaround jumper, a 3 almost entirely off the catch, or a shot at the rim. In other words, he doesn't create for himself ever. He doesn't abuse switches when he finds a guard on his back, he just takes a tough shot over him, which the numbers don't justify as he made just 4 of 12 turnarounds versus LA. He can't consistently attack off the bounce and get to the line 10 times if his shot isn't falling. He took less than 3 free throws a game in this series. He can't amplify others with his playmaking. He didn't even notch a single assist in 3 separate games. His game is predictable, unassertive, and limited, and that's not the kind of style that helps you win big playoff games. So really, it makes perfect sense that he simply faded away into a cast of role players while the team's one true star went to work. Now let's take a look at Julius Randle. After a remarkable regular season, Randle posted one of the worst volume shooting performances ever in the Knicks' 5-game loss to the Hawks, averaging 18 points per game on worse than 30% shooting. Now, Randle's task was much more challenging than Porzingis's, and the context was more complex, but the fact that we saw him fade still makes sense given his skill set. This season, Randle's game was predicated largely upon tough mid-range shot making, as nearly a third of his shots came from the mid-range and getting into the lane and creating for others. Against Atlanta, those tasks were made a lot tougher. First off, he was matched up with DeAndre Hunter, an excellent mover with a 7'2" wingspan who was able to affect lots of those mid-range jumpers, as Randle shot just 3 of 29 for mid-range versus Atlanta. Now, definitely part of that is just bad luck, but again, it's partly due to Hunter as well. With that primary option taken away and just not working, a player has to look to a counter. Can I get downhill consistently? Can I get to the free throw line a ton? But that job was made hard on Randle as well, as he faced an elite rim protector in Clint Capella, who took away those easy shots at the rim and often saw multiple bodies in the paint where he shot just 44%. So then, you keep going down the checklist. Do I have a counter to that? Do I have a floater I can rely on so I can get off good looks in the paint that are largely unaffected by Capella? Randle didn't. Can I at least consistently maximize my value as a playmaker by drawing multiple defenders and finding shooters all day? Randle couldn't really do that either. He averaged more turnovers than assists per game, and maybe the guys around him could have shot a bit better, but he never turned to the drive and kick enough to begin with. Randle was never going to play at a star level just standing behind the line all day, so what did he have to turn to? Nothing, really. And yes, this was 100% a tough matchup, and we can give Randle all the excuses in the world, but true superstars, true foundational pieces are not taken out of their element like that. Randle was because he didn't have enough counters. He wasn't adaptable enough, and you have to be in the playoffs because playoff basketball is about taking an opponent's first option away. You aren't just drifting into Chicago on a Friday night for one of 82 games. Your opponent has at least 4 games to figure out the optimal strategy to make you uncomfortable, and you'll be dealing with a level of effort most teams just don't see in the regular season. Facing that kind of pressure will tell you a lot about your franchise's star. Finally, let's take a look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, Giannis is still putting up big raw numbers in these playoffs, but his scoring is down 2.5 points per game despite his playing more minutes, and his true shooting percentage has dropped from an elite 63.3 to an abysmal 51.8. Keep in mind the average true shooting percentage this year was 57.2, so that is an almost unthinkable decline. For Giannis, these playoff struggles are nothing new. In the playoffs, the game slows down, which is bad news for him. In the regular season, Giannis averaged a by far league-leading 8.2 transition points per game, ranking in the 74th percentile as far as efficiency there, but in the playoffs, he's averaged just 4.7 transition points per game on 5th percentile efficiency, another unthinkably large drop-off that is just a product of how playoff basketball is played. So now Giannis has to do more of his work in the half court, where he's just not as gifted due to his limitations as a jump shooter. In his current matchup, Brooklyn is giving Giannis a considerable runway every possession, practically begging him to shoot and trusting that Blake is strong enough to hold his own with the Greek Freak in the interior, even if he's given a full head of steam, which has largely proven true thus far. So Giannis has tried to take what the defense is giving him, but he's just not good at it. He shot 3 of 16 from deep versus Brooklyn and 3 of 10 on turnarounds and fadeaways as the Bucks' elite regular season offense has dramatically stagnated. Again, he doesn't have the counters. Now, if you stuck with me, what was the point of all that? Well, those 3 guys all put up their shiny regular season numbers, but got dismantled, each to their own extent, in the playoffs. Donnie, on the other hand, is a very good regular season player who takes a leap to apparent superstar status in the playoffs because he has exactly what they lack: a variety of ways in which he can kill you. Now, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean you could throw Donnie into any role or system and he'd thrive. He's not, for example, Steph Curry. He has to be respected off ball because of his shooting, but a whopping 50% of Mitchell's playoff offense has come out of the pick and roll, and his efficiency there has ranked in the 95th percentile, better than every star other than James Harden. But that's not how I'm defining variety here, because great, you know Donnie's getting a screen, but let's look at the number of things he can do with that screen. Well, first off, Mitchell is one of the league's most dynamic handles and explosive first steps. He can blow by almost anybody, and at the rim, he can convert with soft touch, acrobatic dexterity, or raw power, having made 69% of his attempts at the rim in these playoffs. But he doesn't just blow by you. Mitchell also changes pace well and can trap defenders on his back and get into his floater, which he's converted 50% of this postseason. Additionally, while it may not be his most efficient option, Mitchell is unafraid to take mid-range jumpers, another tool in keeping defenses honest that will never lose its value in the clutch. Then, of course, there's his pull-up game, which has been his primary weapon these playoffs. Donnie has taken nearly 8 pull-up threes per game and made a ridiculous 46% of them, crushing defenses time and again with triples that also open up more favorable driving lanes for him. He can slide right by that screen to pull it uncontested, or he can reject the screen entirely, hit you with a vicious cross, and knock one down anyways. Even without a screen in the picture at all, he can kill you from deep, having made 6 of 10 step-back threes in these playoffs as well. So geez, that's pretty intimidating. We want to take that guy away however we can. So let's say you double him. Well, first off, with his controlled handle and absurd quickness, Mitchell splits doubles better than maybe anybody in the league, so he may just get to the cup on you anyways. But let's say you get a good double on him, and he doesn't immediately make you look like a fool for even trying it. Well, he's a significantly improved playmaker, having averaged a career-high 5.2 assists per game this season and 5.3 in these playoffs, and he happens to have the luxury of playing with 3 lethal shooters at basically all times, as the Jazz made the most threes per game in NBA history this year on a 39% clip, and with a very good rollman in Rudy Gobert. Odds are, out of all those options, he finds somebody and you're still dead. And really, no matter what, even if his primary option isn't working, he just won't go away. In his 2 worst shooting nights from deep in these playoffs, Donnie managed to force his way to the bucket repeatedly instead, attempting 11 and 13 free throws respectively, his 2 highest totals of the playoffs, and scoring 29 and 30 points. You just cannot take a player like him away, and at the end of the day, no matter how great the Jazz are as a team, they need a player like that and a shot maker of his caliber. Inevitably, in the last couple minutes of a game, basketball becomes about slow isolation and pick and roll possessions that come down to one-on-one scoring ability. And when you're looking at a landscape that features Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, etc., you need a man who can go toe-to-toe in those battles. Over the last 2 playoffs, Mitchell has done that. He's averaged 5.5 clutch points per game, a significantly higher number than Dame's regular season leading 4.8 on 57% shooting. He'll get to the line, get to his floater, pull a 3 off a screen, get into the mid-range, whatever it takes to get a good look off, and you can't stop him. That is the power of adaptable shot making. And as brilliant as he's been, this isn't just about Mitchell. That's partly why I focus so much on the examples of players who have come up short. It's about Devin Booker, Jamal Murray, a couple of guys who I've made videos on already, and anybody else who can just make big-time shots in a number of ways and whose value therefore grows in the playoffs. There's a lot of ways to win regular season basketball games, but the menu of options gets a lot shorter when it comes to the playoffs. Teams exist to make you uncomfortable there, but with guys like Donnie, they just can't really do it. His bag is too deep, and that is why he has elevated his game so dramatically these past 2 postseasons and will likely continue to do so for the rest of his career. To those of you who've made it this far, thank you so much, guys, for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, you can go ahead and stick around on our YouTube channel. As you can see, we post a lot of our full podcasts here as well. We do 2 of those a week, both on the NBA right now as we are in the swing of the playoff season, but during football season, we touch on the NFL there as well, and we normally do sports history-related content as well, both NBA and NFL, but again, right now, we are kind of fully locked in on the NBA, and you can see that with some of the other specific YouTube content that we've been doing, video breakdown stuff, like the video I made on how Dame played his best basketball ever against the Nuggets last week. You can check that out. You can also check us out on social media, Twitter at nerd_sesh, Instagram at Nerd Sesh, and you can check us out on TikTok at Nerd Sesh as well, where we are just starting to really make content. But that's really all I've got, guys. Thanks so much for watching, as always. Hope you've enjoyed.